Going back on the words of the Prime Minister, we need a plan. The Prime Minister has always said for the last 5 years, he said during the election campaign that we need a plan. And performative little things that he, channeling his inner Trump by signing documents isn't a plan. We need to see the plan and the budget going forward.
Well, folks, there's a lot to talk about, seeing as we are only day 2 of Carney's new cabinet, and we're already starting to see cracks in the foundation. There's a lot of people saying a lot of different things, contrary to what Carney has said. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, if you missed it today, what the Conservative MP John Brassard was talking about was Mark Carney decided to invite the media into the room that they're never really allowed into to witness him signing the executive order to drop the lowest bracket of income tax from 15% to 14%.
Canadians sent a clear message that they need to see improvements in their affordability. We promised a middle-class tax cut leading to over $800 of savings for 2-income households. We're acting today on that so that by July 1st, as promised, that middle-class tax cut that will reduce taxes for the 22 million Canadians who pay federal income taxes, that tax cut will take into effect. We're acting on affordability as we look to build out this economy. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Cabinet to sign this order to deliver that tax cut.
Now, I gotta say, I do find it interesting that the Carney crew, who is so terrified of Donald Trump, seem to be fine with Carney emulating a lot of what Trump does, because this is now the second time that he's brought media into this room to show him signing some executive order, which doesn't really exist. He did this with the consumer carbon tax when he originally reduced it to 0, and now he's doing it with this middle-class income tax cut. But even just the slogans, Donald Trump, who says drill baby drill when they're talking about oil and gas. Carney's been saying build baby build now when he's talking about housing. So a few parallels, but they seem to be fine with it, even though they were so terrified of Poilievre and Trump and this and that. The similarities are so crazy, yet Carney's doing the same thing. Just saying. But when we look at this tax cut, they're saying they're dropping the lowest tax bracket from 15% to 14%. And this will be causing savings of a 2-income family of up to $840 a year. Now, if you break that down into individuals, that's about $420. And then when you break that down even more, it's only $35 a month that they are offering you. Now, if we go back to Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives platform during the election, they were offering to drop it from 15% to 12.75, meaning that each individual would be saving $900 versus the $420 that Carney is offering. And a family income of 2 would be saving $1,800 versus the $840 that Carney's offering. Now, if you break down the $900 per individual, that's about $75 a month you're saving versus the $35 a month from Carney, which, in all honesty, is not going to really break the bank, but $75 is better than $35, so any amount will help. But when we go back to Carney's platform, it's written here, once legislated, the lowest marginal personal income tax will be reduced from 15% to 14% effective July 1st. However, when you scroll down a little bit more and you get to the talking about the income tax, it states that since this is coming in halfway through the year, in 2026, when you are filing your 2025 taxes, the full tax year rate for 2025 will only be 14.5%, not 14. It'll be 14.5. And then in 2027, when you're filing your 2026 taxes, that's when it will be represented at the full 14%. If I'm reading this incorrectly, please let me know, but I'm pretty sure that that's what this just laid out here. Now, in other news, we also had Francois Philippe Champagne come out and say that basically there wasn't going to be a budget for this year. Maybe the budget will come in next year. And reporters were not happy about that and just roasted him while he was right there.
Will you table a budget will you table a budget before summer?
So what we have today is a middle class tax cut. That's step one. Step two, you're going to have a throne speech where we'll outline the Canadian government priority, and there will be a fall economic statement to follow. So those are really the sequence that you're going to see. Tax cut for the middle class, we're going to be introducing a Ways and Means motions as we enter back into Parliament. We'll table legislation. Then there'll be a throne speech, and then we'll present a fall economic statement.
So the fiscal year has begun, Mr. Champagne. The fiscal year has already begun. When are you going to have a framework for the public finances for the year?
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Shouldn't there be one as soon as possible in the fiscal year? Going to leave it to the second half?
That's what I'm saying. So let's take it step by step. Canadians understand that.
I think we heard the steps.
No, but it's not very complicated. But why? Because it needs to go in well, I would say because you need to go in a sequence that is logical. The first thing you do is the first step of this government is a middle class tax cut. That's the first thing. You start with that. Then you say, well, you need to have a throne speech to say what are the priorities of the government. And once you've done that, then you do an economic statement, which is going to be the fall economic statement. So this is the logical piece.
Here at this point, right?
Well,
we're just going to go fall without a budget.
Fall is fall, you know. I could not be clearer than that. Fall is fall. So fall 2025.
Last year, fall was December. Last year, fall was December. It could be nearly a year.
Now, if you were able to make it through Champagne talking there, he mentions that because the election was held in April, that it didn't give them enough time via the parliamentary calendar to put out a fall budget because it would normally come out in April. But if you remember, like I said a few videos ago, Pierre Poilievre was the only one that was talking about making the parliamentarians work through the summer. They were going to cancel their summer vacation and just work through it. Champagne is using the excuse of, oh, well, we're only going to be in the House for a very short period of time. We don't have enough time to do anything. Where even Vashi points out, no, you guys can change that. You have the power to do that.
Because of the way the calendar year worked this year with the election, it just makes sense to ask, to do the first thing first, which is to have the back of Canadians. So for me, putting all our efforts to pass this tax breaks for Canadians, for me, it's priority number one. Because folks who are watching at home and said, give me the tax break that I need now. This is what I've been asking. This is what we campaign on. And that's what we got a mandate from Canadians to deliver. And that's, we say, the first order of business of all the things that this new government, Carney, could do. The first thing we do for Canadians is to give them a tax break. The second thing, we'll have a throne speech because that's how you need to do when you have a new legislature. Then you'll have a fall economic statement.
There is a month in between there before the House
there's
rises.
not many days. You're talking in months. I would say if you look at the parliamentary calendar, you're talking in days. You have the power as the government to extend that. Well, what I'm saying, I'm working on the framework that I have today, but.
So to me, it sounds like that they are going to still be going through their summer vacation, which is absolute BS. These guys haven't been working for the past 9-10 months, and all of these individuals who just got cabinet positions are now making $100,000 more than when they were just a regular MP, but they are working a lot less. And if they are going to take their summer vacation, by the time they get back, it'll be mid-September. He'll put out his fall economic statement. They'll be in the House in and out for a bit, and then they go back on to Christmas break until the end of January of the following year. So these guys are getting paid a lot of money and not really working, whereas Pierre said that as soon as they got back, all the parliamentarians would be working through the summer. Now, he didn't get in, but if you look online, all of these people, especially the Liberals, are just complaining that Pierre Poilievre and his family are staying in the Stornoway House. They keep saying, oh, my taxpayer money is going to this. But they have no problem funding all of these Liberal MPs and their salaries, but they're not even working. So really, where's the problem here? Now, outside of Philippe Champagne, we also had Stephen Guilbeault talking about no pipelines, basically, after Mark Carney had talked about pipelines with Vassy.
Gregor Robertson is saying that you're anti-pipeline still. What do you say in response to her concerns just broadly about the cabinet? And how do you deal with national unity? How do you address that right now?
So on pipelines, people should remember that we bought a pipeline. Trans Mountain, and that is only used right now about 40% capacity. So I think before we start talking about building an entire new pipeline, maybe we should maximize the use of existing infrastructure. And the Canadian Energy Regulator, as well as the International Energy Agency, are telling us that probably by 2028, 2029, demand for oil will peak globally, and it will also peak in Canada. So as far as I know, there are no investors right now. There are no companies that are saying that they want to build an east-west pipeline. And as you know, these things are built by companies, not governments.
Now, what I found interesting was the aftermath of that whole interaction with Guilbeault, because later on the CBC, they had a panel of pundits from Liberal, NDP, and Conservative, and all of them agreed that Guilbeault needs to basically stop talking and stay in his lane. This is not his file anymore. He's not the environmental guy. But the Liberal pundit actually was the one that fact-checked him and kind of threw it back at Guilbeault. Now, David Cochrane did what he does best, and he defended the Liberal, but take a look at this whole interaction here.
Okay, so Tim, we know Daniel Smith is not going to like that. We know Scott Moe is probably not going to like that. What do you make of that answer from Stephen Guilbeault, who has moved away from those files, but he's still the Quebec lieutenant in this government?
I guess there's a new historical moment coming on pipelines. Is there, or the National Film Board's about to tell the story? Well, what the hell is he doing weighing in on that? I mean, I get it is something that is dear to his heart, but it has nothing to do with his current remit. So back to what I said a moment ago and Supriya said a moment ago, guys, get yourself organized or you're going to be in trouble, and you're going to have nights like this every night. Well, why did Cabinet Minister X say that? Why did Cabinet Minister Y say that? Mark Carney yesterday in his interview on another network made the point that, yep, pipelines are on. He's coming out saying no. Again, not a great message, particularly if you're saying to the world, come do business here. Let's invest here. We're serious players. Well, on day 2 of your cabinet, one of your senior ministers is saying, I don't know.
Well, I mean, Jordan, he's not wrong in the point that there is not like there is a proponent with a big west-east pipeline.
But he is contradicting what his boss said yesterday.
Well,
directly contradicting his boss.
Yeah, well, yes, but on the narrow point I just made about a proponent, he's not contradicting anyone because there isn't one, right? But Mark Carney has said, yeah, we want to be an energy superpower, we're open to pipelines, but a pipeline is not the only measure of success here. What do you make of the messaging we're seeing on this, though?
It's not his file. He shouldn't be talking about it. It's pretty straightforward. And look, you're right. There is no proponent that's come forward with a project, and that is something that has escaped many of the other conversations. He's not factually wrong on that, but he shouldn't be talking about it. And that's why I think it's really astonishing that in the end that they decided to keep him in cabinet. And I predict it's all going to end in tears because of his an inability to stay in his lane on this. Literally, you had the Prime Minister out yesterday saying the exact opposite of what he was saying today, and no alignment between them. It's unhelpful, I think, regardless of your view on the projects, to have the government speaking out of both sides of its mouth on this topic.
Okay, Scott Moe has just issued a list of demands he wants Mark Carney to meet. That's what I was looking at there. We'll get to that when I actually have time to read it and digest it. I'm not going to spring it on you.
So he wants Stephen Guilbeault?
Yeah, well, I don't think that's the case. Supriya, I mean, okay, it's not his file. But to get the West-East pipeline to where people want it to go, it has to go through Quebec. And, he is the Quebec lieutenant, right? So that it kind of is his file, in a sense, as the one regional minister who exists in the government. But, what do you make of what we're seeing there in terms of this and, going into that first ministers' meeting that the Prime Minister is going to have at the beginning of June?
I mean, a couple of things. I mean, it's probably not the best if within 24 hours of you announcing your first cabinet and after your first cabinet meeting, you have not one, not two, but at least a few ministers, like 3 or 4 ministers, being completely off kilter from your own message. And in Guilbeault's case, to Jordan's point about it's not his file, so just, say that. To your point about it being, going through Quebec, that's fair, but he can also say something to that effect without also misspeaking about the capacity that TMX is operating on, because it isn't actually 40%, it's closer to something like 75 or 76%. And so not only did he say something to contradict his own boss, he's not even spitting real facts here. And I think that also, in terms of just needing to walk past the cameras or not needing to stop to comment, should be a lesson to all of these ministers going in and out of that room.
Now, what's funny is the attacks actually didn't just stop with Guilbeault, because if you remember Mr. Wayne Long, the individual who kind of started what one of the pundits here says is an insurrection against Justin Trudeau, he was the one who kind of was very vocal, got the signatures, started the whole petition to get Trudeau out. He's now back as a Secretary of State. And he said kind of something about the government running like a corporation, and that's what we've been needing. And these ladies just chewed him out.
Right, and I want to just pair this with a comment we got from, there were a lot of new faces going into the cabinet today, and one of those is Wayne Long. Well, not a full minister, he's part of the ministry. He's the Secretary of State for the Canada Revenue Agency and Financial Institutions, and famously the first Liberal caucus member to openly call for Justin Trudeau's resignation. But here's what he had to say about how he thinks this new government will run. This is Wayne Long.
I think Mark Carney is exactly what the country is needed and needs. He's well-spoken, he's thoughtful, he's focused. And I think we're going to see our government run like a corporation, which I think is long overdue.
That is an interesting, Jordan, I'll stick with you. That is an interesting choice of words. I think you hear a lot of people say they want government to run more efficiency and maybe be a little bit more business-like, but like a corporation. I mean, what do you think is meant there, and how do you think that plays?
Mr. Long is proving that leading insurrection doesn't perhaps qualify you to be a minister. Look, I think it's a terrible comment. Like, the government is not a corporation. That's not its job. And particularly, the CRA is not a corporation. Its job is to operate efficiently. Its job is to operate transparently and to get that work done. But I think that this whole notion that somehow Carney's going to come in and run the government like it's a business is actually not what Canadians want to hear. They are interested in, yes, having better government services, but they want a government that's delivering things to them. And, you know, corporations have a profit motive. Our government doesn't. It is in the business of serving Canadians. And I think that that would be a much better core message for Mr. Long and his colleagues to have.
So, Priya, what are your thoughts on that one?
If you're talking about, like, let's actually think of what a corporation is and what it does. The singular role of a corporation is to maximize profits for its shareholders while limiting its liability. And that should quite literally never be the role of a federal government, since governments have to spend money on all sorts of things that will never turn a profit. And we don't want the government to constantly be in a situation where all they're thinking about is maximizing profits. I get where he was coming from in terms of, as you said, David, finding more efficiencies, whatever, but that's not how it came out. And perhaps some of these, you know, newbies would be best to just walk by the cameras and not say anything.
I gotta say, it's starting to look like if a few of these ministers don't tighten up what they say, they might not have their position for much longer. But just to round it all off, last but not least, is the new housing guy, Gregor Robertson, as he was questioned about should prices of housing be reduced. And he simply said, no, it's just a supply issue.
And making sure we're building enough supply, and that the federal government is focused on affordable housing and delivering that. No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable.
Now, this again actually goes against what Mark Carney said in the interview with Vashi, and Vashi brings this up with Francois-Philippe Champagne, asking him if he actually agrees with Roberts and his statement. Now, she then throws a huge jab at him and saying, well, you liberals actually won with the boomer support and they have housing kind of secured, so maybe that's why you're not really thinking about bringing down prices.
I know that your time is limited, but you brought up the issue of affordability. I do want to ask you specifically on affordability and the pledges your government has made around, and your party made during the campaign around housing. Today, the new Minister of Housing, Gregor Robertson, in response to a question about whether home prices need to go down in order to make them more affordable, said no, that the government instead needs to focus on increasing the supply of affordable homes. The day before, the Prime Minister had a different stance that essentially, conceded, the housing prices, in not so many words, would be, why would you think we would think differently that housing prices need to go down? Which is it?
Well, to be honest, I've learned one thing in politics. Be mindful of commenting on things you've not seen. So I've not seen the comments of Gregor today, the new minister, or what the Prime Minister.
What is your view as the finance minister? Do home prices need to go down?
Well, you need to do both. You need to increase the stock, which will also have an impact on prices, I would say. So there's a lot of things we need to do. So by increasing the stock, it will have an impact on prices.
And you think that's necessary? I'll tell you why I'm asking. Because
yes.
essentially the criticism of your party is you were so successful with, for example, older Canadians who own homes, who don't want to see them devalued, that's what's informing the position that Minister Robertson took, that essentially you can affect affordability without dropping prices, which outside studies have shown would take 20 to 40 years to be the case.
Yeah,
it certainly won't help, but it certainly won't help young Canadians who can't afford a home right now. So I just want to be clear, as the finance minister, you do think home prices need to drop to make housing more affordable.
Now, one could say that was a pretty softball question from Vashi, a very simple yes or no, what do you think? And he still was unable to just give a straightforward answer. He started going on about rural areas and housing markets being different in different places. Like, just a simple yes or no. Our house is too expensive. Are you going to help Canadians out? You're going to increase the supply, which you've been promising for the past 10 years, but now you guys are going to crack down on it. Like, this housing accelerator program that Roberts was talking about hasn't built anything. Yet we're just supposed to trust them again for, I don't know, another 4 years with this. It's absolutely ridiculous. But as always, I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. If you can, I'd appreciate the subscription. It always helps the channel grow and reach other places. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.